Hey everyone, welcome back to MangaMinute. I'm thrilled to share my latest recap video with you. If you missed the previous one, no worries, just take a quick peek in the description below for the link. Now, let's dive right in and enjoy.
Yunho's expression was a tapestry of grief and gratitude. Yunho stood in solemn reverence, a deep melancholy settling in his heart. His regal demeanor softened as he placed the incense in a small, ornate burner, a final gesture of respect to the one who had guided him. The bustling atmosphere of the gathering took Yunho by surprise. He had expected a quiet affair, perhaps a modest gathering, but instead found himself amidst a sea of people. The presence of so many members of the 9 factions, the 5 great clans, and even external forces and individuals from various other sects was overwhelming. It seemed that the event had drawn attention from far and wide, far more than Yunho had anticipated. Somi, his younger sister, seemed unfazed by the crowd. She had always been perceptive, picking up on details that others might overlook. It wasn't surprising that she knew about the diverse mix of attendees. After all, she had often observed the people their father met with, sometimes without his realization. Her keen eyes had allowed her to recognize many faces in the crowd. Their father, Hajinyu, was a figure of authority and respect. He excused himself from his children, explaining that he had to converse with the various dignitaries and guests. He reassured them that they could enjoy the feast without him, a common occurrence during such gatherings. Somi responded with a respectful acknowledgement, accustomed to her father's responsibilities. As Hajinyu mingled with the crowd, Yunho felt a sudden need to distance himself from the throng. The noise and commotion were stifling, and he craved a moment of solitude. He informed Somi that he would step outside to clear his head, asking her to save him some of the meal, especially the meat. Somi nodded, understanding her brother's need for space, and assured him that she would set aside a generous portion for him. At a table crowded with laughter and conversation, Pangjik vented his frustration to his friends. The monotony of attending yet another somber funeral was wearing on him, and he couldn't help but express his growing impatience. Myung-soo, in a half-joking tone, suggested that a woman at their table might lift the dreary atmosphere. A sentiment Suk Horyol echoed with a mischievous grin, emphasizing that she should be pretty. Their eyes fell upon Somi, not far from their table. Pangjik, eager to change the mood, decided to act on the suggestion. Rising from his seat, he made his way over to her with a determined stride. Without warning, he grabbed her hand, startling her. Somi recoiled, her voice rising in protest as she struggled against his grip. Her eyes flashed with a mixture of fear and anger, her free hand instinctively moving to try to pry his fingers away. Pangjik's expression darkened, his grip tightening as he tried to justify his actions with a twisted sense of righteousness. He insisted that he only wanted to share in the collective sorrow of the occasion, attempting to mask his coercion as a misguided effort to connect. His voice carried a grim tone, laced with a warning, as he demanded compliance. The force of his grip made Somi wince, and his words, though cloaked in a veneer of politeness, carried an undeniable threat. As Yunho returned from his brief respite, he spotted the scene unfolding with his sister. His eyes narrowed as he watched Pangjik forcefully grabbing Somi's wrist, and he approached with a calm yet cold demeanor. With a mocking tone, he interrupted, likening Pangjik to a rutting beast causing chaos in a place of mourning. Pangjik, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of Yunho, immediately recognized him and demanded to know if he was the owner of the heavenly sword. Yunho's response was measured, hinting at the trouble Pangjik was inviting by prying into such matters. However, Pangjik, puffed up with arrogance and a sense of entitlement as the eldest son of the Peng family, brushed off the warning. He claimed he had only wanted a moment's conversation with Somi and smirked as he demanded an apology from Yunho for what he perceived as an insult. Unfazed, Yunho responded with a sardonic smile, suggesting that Pangjik should instead apologize to Somi if he wanted to avoid further humiliation. This only fueled Pangjik's anger, and he sneered at Yunho, belittling him as a mere merchant with money and dismissing his warning as arrogance. With a look of disdain, Yunho continued to provoke him, calling him an angry beast. Enraged, Pangjik lashed out, attempting to strike Yunho, but Yunho, with a fluid motion, effortlessly dodged the attack, leaning back gracefully. Pangjik, surprised by Yunho's agility, mocked him for having some skill. However, Yunho swiftly countered by tripping Pangjik, sending him crashing to the ground. As Pang Jik fell, Yunho calmly remarked on his own skill, and in a swift, decisive move, grabbed Pang Jik's foot and snapped his ankle. Pang Jik cried out in pain, clutching his injured ankle. The onlookers watched in stunned silence, the air thick with tension. Yunho stood over him, his expression cold and unyielding, a silent warning to anyone else who might consider disrespecting his family. Seeing their friend being attacked, Moyoung-soo and Suk Horyol immediately sprang into action. With shouts of anger, they charged at Yunho, intent on avenging Pang Jik. However, Yunho's reflexes and combat skills were far superior. He easily dodged their attacks, moving with a fluid grace that left them striking at empty air. In a matter of moments, Yunho had subdued them both, swiftly and efficiently, leaving them incapacitated on the ground. Meanwhile, Pang Jik struggled to rise, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. He muttered threats under his breath, his voice thick with venom. The insults he spat out were laced with frustration and a desperate need to reclaim some semblance of dignity. Yunho's expression turned cold as he listened to Pang Jik's outburst. With a swift motion, he pinned Pang Jik back to the ground, his movements precise and controlled. Yunho's eyes bore into him, a mix of disdain and warning in his gaze. He questioned the insult thrown at him, emphasizing the honor of his lineage. There was a grim intensity in his voice as he referenced his late master, hinting at the restraint he was exercising. If not for the teachings and advice of his master, Yunho made it clear that he would have dealt with the situation far more harshly. The commotion drew the attention of Namgung-hyun, who quickly intervened, demanding to know what was happening. As he surveyed the scene, his eyes widened slightly at the sight of Moyoung-soo, Suk Horyol, and Pang Jik sprawled on the ground. He couldn't help but inwardly curse the trio, frustrated by their inability to maintain their composure and position in such a public setting. Yunho, unbothered by the interruption, addressed Namgung-hyun with a knowing look, suggesting that the situation required no further explanation. Namgung-hyun, maintaining a stern demeanor, introduced himself as the deputy head of the Hyeongdang, the body responsible for enforcing the rules within the Namgung clan. He asserted that they would handle the situation according to their clan's laws and urged Yunho to stand down. However, Yunho's calm voice carried a sharp edge as he pointed out the severity of the situation. He couldn't believe the audacity of these men, openly harassing the daughter of a lord from one of the 3 houses during a mourning period and insulting him and his father. He subtly challenged Namgung-hyun's authority, implying that the Namgung clan's rules might be too lenient, especially when dealing with someone from the 5 generations of the Orthodox faction. Not far from the altercation, a middle-aged man sat quietly, sipping his drink and observing the scene with keen interest. He murmured to himself, noting the ease with which Yunho, the heir of a merchant family, had dispatched the 3 late-stage martial masters. His eyes gleamed with excitement, clearly intrigued by the unexpected turn of events. The man's expression suggested that he was eager to see how the situation would unfold, fascinated by the display of skill and power from an unlikely source. Somi's voice trembled with indignation as she explained the situation, recounting how she had politely declined Pang Jik's advances, only to be forcefully grabbed and dragged along. Her words were filled with a mix of frustration and fear, and she held out her wrist, which bore the marks of the encounter. Yunho gently took her hand, his eyes narrowing as he examined the bruises. He reassured her that, although she would be in pain for a few days, she would recover fully once he applied some medicine. As they seated together, a man suddenly interjected, asking if there was a seat available for an old man. Yunho turned to observe the newcomer, noting his worn-out clothes and the 8 knots adorning his attire. The sight piqued Yunho's curiosity, and he pondered the significance of the man's appearance. He responded politely, though his gaze sharpened as he continued to assess the situation. Among the many looks directed their way, Yunho felt one particularly unsettling gaze. It belonged to Elder Gabang, a figure whose presence sent a ripple of unease through the air. The elder's eyes held a depth of wisdom and experience, but there was also a hint of something more, something that made Yunho wary. He remained composed, masking his thoughts behind a calm facade as he addressed the old man. The man, known as Chugwonge, an elder of the beggar clan, approached with a casual demeanor, though his eyes gleamed with sharp intelligence. He acknowledged that his earlier comments might have come across as a bit too forward and mentioned hearing about Yunho's training under the late master. Sensing Yunho's impatience, Chugwange decided to forego the pleasantries and get straight to the point. Despite his modest appearance, he exuded a certain pride as he spoke about his knack for spotting talent. He saw great potential in Yunho and extended an invitation for him to join the Murimal Alliance, promising that it would elevate his abilities to new heights. Yunho, however, remained unfazed. The mention of the Murim Alliance, the top martial arts union in the martial world, did not sway him. After a moment of contemplation, he firmly declined the offer, stating simply that he had no interest. Chugwange expressed mild surprise at the outright rejection, curious about Yunho's reasoning. Yunho, maintaining his composure, replied that he simply wasn't interested, offering no further explanation. Recognizing Yunho's resolve, Chugwange did not press the issue. However, he warned Yunho of a looming threat. He spoke of Quan Wangpangji, known as the Unruly Bloodthirsty Lord, a notorious figure in the Habuk Panga province and the 24th Lord of Eunho. Chugwange revealed that the young man Yunho had bested earlier was none other than someone dearly cherished by Quan Wangpangji. Given the man's violent reputation, Chugwange cautioned that the Panga lineage would not take kindly to such an affront. Yunho's expression hardened as he connected the dots, realizing the gravity of the situation. Chugwange, sensing Yunho's unease, offered a potential resolution. He suggested that he could inform Master Mangju and resolve the situation peacefully, provided Yunho showed even a slight interest in joining the Murim Alliance. This, Chugwange implied, would offer protection from the impending backlash. However, Yunho remained steadfast. He calmly noted that Chugwange's words were making his younger sister, Somi, uncomfortable. With a polite but firm tone, he requested that if there was nothing more to discuss, Chugwange should refrain from further interruptions and allow them to continue their meal in peace. The subtle dismissal underscored Yunho's resolve and his prioritization of his family's well-being over any external affiliations or threats. As Chugwange prepared to leave, he cast a final, enigmatic remark, hinting that their paths would cross again soon. His departure left a lingering tension in the air. Somi, visibly worried, turned to her brother with concern etched on her face, questioning whether it was wise to let Chugwange go so easily. Yunho, maintaining a calm demeanor, reassured her with quiet confidence. He assured Somi that there was no cause for concern, despite their lack of deep knowledge about his capabilities. His words were meant to be a source of comfort, conveying his unshakable belief in his own strength and the situation's management. Meanwhile, Chugwange walked away, his mind abuzz with contemplation. He found himself struck by Yunho's unwavering confidence, particularly in the face of the imminent threat posed by the Peng family. Chugwange marveled at Yunho's composure, noting the absence of any visible fear in his eyes. To him, Yunho's confidence was not mere bravado but genuine self-assurance. This realization stirred a mix of frustration and admiration within Chugwange. As he continued on his way, he muttered under his breath, a sense of irritation mingling with begrudging respect for the young man's remarkable demeanor. A man enraged, his face a mask of exasperation and anger, reprimanded Pang Jik for his careless behavior. His voice was sharp, filled with frustration at JK's lack of restraint and judgment. Despite Pang Jik's attempts to placate him, the man's ire did not subside. Turning his attention to Namgunghyun, the man voiced his concerns about the escalating situation. He questioned the necessity of such severe measures, particularly the decision to imprison someone over what had transpired. His tone suggested a mix of disappointment and skepticism. Namgunghyun, remaining composed, defended his actions by explaining that the situation was handled according to the disciplinary measures of the Namgung clan. He maintained a respectful demeanor while standing firm on the principles that guided his decisions. Despite Namgunghyun's calm and reasoned response, the man's frustration persisted. He issued a stern warning, indicating that if the Lord of Habuk Panga learned of the incident, he would not remain silent. The implication of potential repercussions loomed large, adding weight to the conversation. Namgunghyun, undeterred by the threat, responded with a resolute tone, affirming that in the Namgung clan, no one was above the rules. His words underscored his commitment to upholding the clan's standards and principles, regardless of external pressures or threats. Quan Wangpangji's reaction to the news was one of outrage and disbelief. his face flushed with anger as he absorbed the report that his son was being held in the dungeon. The news struck him deeply, igniting a fierce response. He demanded to know how such an insult had been allowed to occur, his frustration palpable as he absorbed the implications of his son's imprisonment. The advisor, seeking to mitigate the situation, explained that he had attempted to secure the release of Kwon Wangpaengji's son, but Nam Gunghyun had been adamant about following the rules. This attempt at diplomacy did little to calm Kwon Wangpaengji. His anger only intensified, and he issued a harsh order for Hapyeong Daeju to break both of the merchant's son's legs, a demand that underscored his fury and desire for retribution. Despite the advisor's efforts to reason with Kwon Wangpaengji, pointing out the potential damage to their long-standing financial relationship with Chonhajang if the situation worsened, Kwon Wangpaengji's rage remained unchecked. He vehemently rejected the notion of standing idly by while his son faced disgrace and imprisonment. His emotions were raw and his resolve unyielding. Determined to take matters into his own hands, Kwon Wangpaengji declared his intention to personally deal with the situation. His expression was grim and resolute, reflecting his readiness to escalate the conflict further if necessary. The atmosphere grew tense, with Kwon Wangpaengji's anger threatening to boil over. In a desperate bid to prevent further escalation, Hapyeong Daeju intervened. He offered to handle the situation himself, pleading for Kwon Wangpaengji to reconsider and allow him to manage the matter. The advisor, caught in the middle of the mounting tension, expressed his own reluctance but acknowledged the unavoidable situation. He recognized the gravity of Kwon Wangpaengji's high regard for his son and the resulting conflict. With a resigned tone, he instructed Hapyeong Daeju on the necessary course of action. The advisor tasked Hapyeong Daeju with managing the situation with utmost caution. The order was clear: address the matter discreetly and appropriately, ensuring that the resolution was handled quietly and without drawing attention. The advisor emphasized the urgency of the situation, specifying that it needed to be resolved that very night. The servant approached the young lord of Chonhajang with a message from his father. The servant conveyed that, due to the anticipated length of the discussions, it would be best for the young lord to retire to the guest quarters and rest. This advice came amid the ongoing, lengthy conversations that seemed to stretch well into the night, as opportunities for everyone to come together in one place were few and far between. Somi, noting the scarcity of such gatherings, expressed her discontent about the protracted nature of the discussions. Yunho, acknowledging the situation, agreed to head to the guest quarters, suggesting they also grab a bite to eat. His growing weariness from the constant scrutiny was evident. The servant, maintaining a respectful demeanor, offered to guide them to their designated quarters. As they followed him through the dimly lit corridors, Hapyeong Daeju, reflecting on the day's events, lamented the unexpected challenges of dealing with younger individuals. His thoughts revealed a sense of frustration and fatigue with the complexities of his role. Upon arriving at the guest quarters, Yunho instructed Somi to go inside and rest. Somi, concerned for her elder brother, inquired about his own plans. Yunho, feeling the effects of his earlier indulgence, expressed a desire to take a brief walk. Somi, concerned for his well-being, admonished him to avoid staying out too late and to return soon. As Yunho took a leisurely stroll through the quiet, moonlit grounds, he mulled over the unsettling presence of an intruder. He had sensed someone lurking nearby, though he was unsure of the intruder's identity. Yunho, drawing upon his keen instincts, decided to confront the hidden threat. He called out to the unseen presence, questioning the intruder's patience and inviting them to reveal themselves after making the effort to follow him to this secluded spot. Hapyeong Daeju, who had been silently observing and preparing an ambush, was taken aback. Despite his meticulous use of the turtle breath technique to erase his traces, he was shocked that Yunho had detected him. Hapyeong Daeju attempted to reassure himself, convinced that Yunho must be bluffing or attempting to provoke him. However, Yunho's mocking tone and the mention of Hapyeong Daeju's agitated breathing heightened the tension. Hapyeong Daeju, grappling with his own frustration and anger, wondered if Yunho's comments were a ploy to unsettle him or if they reflected a deeper truth. Despite his internal conflict, Hapyeong Daeju resolved to act, believing that the situation could be resolved discreetly if no one was around to witness it. With a surge of anger and determination, Hapyeong Daeju sprang from his hiding place, preparing for a vicious attack. But Yunho, displaying a calm and effortless demeanor, anticipated the assault. As Hapyeong Daeju leaped towards him, Yunho effortlessly turned and mocked the failed ambush. With a single, deft kick, Yunho sent Hapyeong Daeju crashing into the wall, illustrating the ineffectiveness of his opponent's martial skills and underscoring his own superior prowess. Yunho maintained his calm demeanor, his voice carrying a hint of disdain as he addressed the defeated Hapyeong Daeju. He questioned the man's motives, pointing out the cowardice of striking from behind and radiating murderous intent so blatantly. Hapyeong Daeju, seething with anger, muttered a curse under his breath. But Yunho only responded with a mocking challenge, inviting him to show his true strength. Provoked by the taunt, Hapyeong Daeju launched another fierce attack, charging at Yunho with all his might. Yet, to his shock and frustration, Yunho stood unmoved, not even raising a hand to counter. The powerful blow was effortlessly deflected by a shimmering barrier that surrounded Yunho, leaving Hapyeong Daeju stunned. The astonishment in Hapyeong Daeju's eyes grew as he recognized the nature of the barrier. It was a formidable defensive chi shield, something unexpected from someone so young. Yunho's lips curled into a smirk as he acknowledged his excellent master, subtly hinting at the source of his strength. He then delivered a chilling message, suggesting that if Hapyeong Daeju and his ilk truly wanted a confrontation, they should send someone stronger next time. Enraged and humiliated, Hapyeong Daeju attempted to retort, his voice rising in fury. But before he could finish his insult, Yunho moved with lightning speed. In an instant, Yunho struck, sending Hapyeong Daeju flying backward. The force of the blow left him unconscious, a stark testament to the vast difference in their abilities. Yunho's calm remained unbroken, a silent reminder of the futility of opposing him. As the dust settled from the brief confrontation, Chugwongae suddenly appeared, his tone laced with exaggerated concern. He claimed to have stumbled upon the scene by coincidence and inquired if Yunho was injured. Yunho, clearly irritated by the intrusion, dismissed the concern with a curt reply, indicating that he hadn't even been scratched. Chugwongae's gaze shifted to the unconscious figure on the ground. He murmured in mild curiosity about the man's identity, but as he looked closer, his eyes widened in shock. Hapyeong Daeju, he muttered, recognizing the defeated man. Yunho, intrigued by the reaction, casually asked if Chugwongae knew the man. Chugwongae explained that Hapyeong Daeju was a formidable martial arts master, leading the elite force of the Ha-Buk Panga clan, known as Hapyeong. Yunho's response was nonchalant, barely acknowledging the significance of the information. Chugwongae, clearly taken aback by Yunho's lack of concern, emphasized the gravity of the situation. The fact that the Panga clan's leader had sent their best indicated a serious intent not to let the matter slide. However, Yunho remained unruffled, reminding Chugwongae that he'd heard similar warnings earlier. With a tone of genuine worry, Chugwongae implored Yunho to consider the danger he was in, especially if the head of the Panga clan decided to get involved personally. Despite Chugwongae's pleas, Yunho remained dismissive, threatening to leave if the conversation veered towards joining the Murim alliance. As Yunho walked away, he muttered to himself about the noise Chugwongae was making and considered silencing him permanently. Left alone, Chugwongae retorted in frustration, acknowledging Yunho's reckless behavior and lamenting his lack of common sense. He quickly reconsidered the situation, realizing that the head of the Panga clan might be the one facing a greater predicament than they had anticipated. The advisor hurriedly reported the current situation to Kwan Wangpangji. They had found Hapyeong Daeju collapsed in front of the faction's headquarters and had quickly brought him to safety. Despite there being no major injuries, the advisor noted that Hapyeong Daeju remained unconscious. Kwan Wangpangji, visibly tense, took in the news. The fact that Hapyeong Daeju was still unresponsive despite the lack of severe physical harm was troubling. The situation had clearly escalated beyond what they had anticipated, and the implications of such an attack on a prominent member of their clan were not to be taken lightly. Kwan Wangpangji erupted in anger upon hearing the news, his voice echoing through the room. He had sent Hapyeong Daeju with a simple task, to break the legs of the young merchant's son who had dared to defy them. But instead of returning triumphant, Hapyeong Daeju had come back humiliated. Hapyeong Daeju, still shaken from the encounter, attempted to explain himself. He described how the young man had seen through his advanced hiding technique and even employed a formidable defensive chi shield. This wasn't an ordinary opponent. He had underestimated him and paid the price. Wang Pengji was not appeased. His fury only grew as he rebuked Hapyeong Daeju for his carelessness and excuses. The head of the Panga clan demanded to know where this audacious young man was now, intent on dealing with the matter personally. Before the situation could escalate further, the advisor interrupted with urgent news. He apologized and informed Wang Pengji that the leader of the Murim alliance was soon to arrive, a proclamation that brought a tense silence to the room. The gravity of the situation deepened, as the arrival of such a significant figure could have far-reaching consequences for all involved. Inside the somber morning hall, the air was heavy with the scent of incense. Namgung Mengju stood solemnly before the ancestral altar, paying his respects to his deceased brother. The flickering candlelight cast a warm glow on his face, reflecting the deep sorrow and reverence in his eyes. As he carefully lit the incense sticks, he bowed his head in silent prayer, honoring the memory of his lost sibling. The quiet crackle of the burning incense and the soft rustling of his robes were the only sounds in the stillness of the hall, a place filled with the weight of grief and the unspoken words of farewell. As Namgung Jin guided his uncle towards the exit of the morning hall, he inquired about his plans. He asked if Namgung Mengju would be staying until the funeral. Mengju, with a tone of duty and restraint, explained that his responsibilities as the leader of the Murim alliance left him with little time to mourn as a member of the Namgung clan. His obligations demanded his immediate return to the stronghold. Outside the hall, a crowd had gathered to pay their respects to the esteemed leader. As Mengju stepped into the courtyard, the gathered people greeted him in unison. "We greet the Lord." Mengju acknowledged them with a simple smile, a gesture that conveyed both grace and authority. Among the onlookers, Yunho observed Mengju with a keen eye. He marveled at the overwhelming aura emanating from the Murim alliance leader, noting how his mere presence commanded respect and awe. Recalling his master's words, Yunho recognized the figure before him as the legendary Sword King, Namgung Mengju, a man who had competed with the Devil Sect leader for supremacy. A surge of excitement welled up within Yunho as he thought about the possibility of facing such a formidable opponent in combat. As Yunho continued to scan the crowd, his gaze landed on a familiar figure, the patriarch of the Peng clan. The man's appearance, reminiscent of a stubborn bear cub, caught Yunho's attention. A hint of a smirk played on Yunho's lips as he considered the prospect of challenging the Peng clan leader instead, entertaining the thought of a different kind of battle. As tensions mounted, Namgung Jin addressed the Peng patriarch with a stern demeanor, questioning the reason behind the disturbance caused in the presence of the Murim alliance leader. He reminded Quan Wangpaengji of the rules governing the Namgung clan, emphasizing that all matters within the clan must be handled according to established protocols without exceptions. Quan Wangpaengji, feeling slighted, responded with irritation, questioning whether the Namgung leader intended to provoke him until the end. Namgung Jin remained composed, reiterating that the rules dictated the public exposure of wrongdoings and the administration of punishment. He explained that, out of respect for the dignity of the three individuals involved, he had postponed the execution and confined them to prison. Quan Wangpaengji, visibly enraged, expressed his frustration, turning to his companion for support. The patriarch of the Moyong family, however, responded with resignation, acknowledging that if the punishment followed the rules, there was little else to be said. This response further fueled Quan Wangpaengji's anger, leading him to lash out, calling his companion useless. Namgung Jin stepped in, urging the Peng patriarch to maintain his composure. He reminded him that there were limits to what could be forced, cautioning against further escalation. The atmosphere was charged, with underlying tensions simmering beneath the surface, as the leaders of the prominent clans faced off, each standing firm in their convictions. Hajinyu's face was set in grim determination as he spoke. His anger simmered just below the surface as he addressed the assembled figures. He made it clear that any apology offered was unlikely to be accepted, given the gravity of the situation. The assault on his daughter by their eldest son had left her with dark bruises on her otherwise delicate body, a wound that was both physical and emotional. Despite his efforts to quell the situation and move past the initial confrontation, the flames of resentment had been reignited, exacerbated by the ongoing provocations. Hajinyu's demeanor was a stark reminder of the power wielded by the merchant class. He warned that underestimating the influence and resources of Chanhajang could lead to dire consequences. The threat was implicit but unmistakable. He was prepared to leverage the full extent of his wealth and influence if necessary, revealing a side of the merchant class that could wield its power in unexpected and formidable ways. Unable to secure the release of his imprisoned son, Kwon Wangpaengji stormed out of the room in a fit of rage. As he exited, he encountered Yunho and Somi, who were waiting outside. With fury barely contained, Wangpaengji barked a threat as he passed them, his voice dripping with menace, warning them of their fortunate escape from his wrath. Yunho, unfazed, smirked and addressed him with a taunting tone, calling him a little bear cub. The insult hung in the air, shocking Wangpaengji, who turned back in disbelief. His eyes narrowed as he questioned what he had just heard, his pride clearly wounded. With a calm and measured demeanor, Yunho clarified his words, suggesting that Wangpaengji might have difficulty understanding. He reiterated the insult, stating that to him, the patriarch resembled nothing more than a little bear cub. The words were delivered with an air of dismissive confidence, leaving Wangpaengji seething and humiliated. The confrontation marked a tense moment, highlighting the sharp contrast between Yunho's calm demeanor and Wangpaengji's barely contained fury.